Uh-huh.
Uh, Good morning, Year 5, and this is my introduction to your history topic, which is the ancient Greeks. And I'm really pleased to say hello to Mrs. Bulloss.
Hi, everybody.
I've persuaded Mrs. Now we know Mrs. Bulloss is on maternity leave, but I thought it'd be really nice for her to chip in into one of these videos, and for you, and we'll invite Year 6 as well. So hello, Year 6, is to
Hi,
hear
yes,
Mrs. Bulloss.
Nick.
Sorry.
I'm just saying hello.
Yeah, good. For her class and the Year 6 children to hear her voice. Now, how's the baby, Mrs. Bulloss?
Oh, the baby, Sam, is absolutely fine. He's been having a very lazy morning today after being up most of the night. So he's just been chilling.
Yeah,
Whilst Dad, to be honest, not me, has been a bit grumpy because they've not had much sleep. But,
well,
he's gorgeous. It's all good.
that goes with the whole package, doesn't it? What about and he looks really healthy because you showed me a picture earlier, and he looks like a really bonny little chap.
Oh, he's robust. Oh, you throw that word in there. He's quite a big little chunk now from the tiny
Yeah,
little thing he was
I
when he was
think
first born.
yeah, I think he looks just about right. He looks really cute.
He's lovely.
Anyway, why I've asked Mrs. Bulloss is because she's our history lead, so she's our history expert. Yeah. So we've gone through this. We've just had a little meeting. We've been told by Mr. Bulloss that we haven't got things right, but we think we have. So we were ignoring that. We're just ploughing on regardless. So on our first screen that you can see is the two questions that we have come up with. The first question, when were the ancient Greeks around? So what time frame we're talking about is the question that we're going to answer today. And the second question, what is the lasting legacy of the ancient Greeks, is the bigger question that we will come back to as we go through this history topic. So let's kick off with that first question. When were the ancient Greeks around? Now, before we start to address that question, Mrs. Bulloss and I have come up with some vocabulary that you will need to be thinking about as we learn more about the ancient Greeks. Because they gave us lots of words, didn't they, Mrs. Bulloss?
Oh, absolutely loads that we use all the time, and there's words that we use all the time now that have links to the ancient Greeks, and you don't even realise where they've come from, which I think when you start to break them down is really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the words we're going to be, and things we're going to be learning and talking about today is democracy, which means rule of the people. And you can see underneath in orange or yellow, I've written where the word democracy comes from, and they're two separate Greek words that have been pushed together. So demos meaning from the people, and so kratia there is power and rule. So you can see rule of the people is what the actual meaning of democracy is. The Olympics, of course, Mrs. Bulloss.
Oh yes, love the Olympics.
Yeah, which the Greeks gave us. They invented the Olympics. I think the first ever one was 776 BC. I still remember that from teaching Year 6 at Rothwell Junior School,
Gosh.
which is very different Olympic Games, obviously, wasn't it? Like obviously not the high-tech gear and things, a bit more
No, it was
rudimentary.
massively different.
Yeah, and I think a lot of sort of wrestling and things like that, physical stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. Philosophy, which is you will have heard of. I mean, obviously Harry Potter fans, Philosopher's Stone. So the study of theory and ideas. The Greeks gave us that word, philosophy, and there were some very famous Greek philosophers, of course. So those three words there are words that we use every day in our everyday language. Here are some other words that are really closer associated with just when we talk about the ancient Greeks. So there's something called the Parthenon, which is a temple in Athens. You've got the word Acropolis, which is a citadel built on a hill in Athens. You've got the Agora, which is an open space used for meetings and markets. Mount Olympus, you probably will have heard of, which was the home to the Greek gods. If you've ever read the Percy Jackson, me and Mrs. Bulloss were talking earlier about Percy Jackson, if you've ever read those novels, they're all set to do with the ancient Greeks. You've got Zeus, which is the name of one of the gods, one of the Greek gods. And then you've got Athens and Sparta. You, of course, will have heard of Athens as a Greek place. But Sparta is another one of the ancient city-states. So let's go back to one of the questions that we asked: when were the ancient Greeks around? And me and Mrs. Bulloss have been exploring this little timeline that we've created. So this is part of the debate we had, wasn't it? That traditionally we look at history in terms of BC and AD, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what somebody decided to do, I think he was a monk at some point, decided to split time up into BC, before the birth of Jesus Christ, because we obviously live in a Christian society mainly. So before the birth of Christ, and then AD, Anno Domini, which is what we would call time, sort of modern time as we know it. So what I've done here is I've created a timeline that features, look, Earthenborough in 2020. Down here where my little cursor is, you can see the nationwide. What else is on the high street, Mrs. Bulloss? Can you remember?
Oh, there's the Tesco's.
Yeah, Tesco's over the road there. There's
Cafe 24. Is it Cafe 24?
or 28 or 29.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't remember.
it's in
Yeah,
the 20s.
yeah, it's definitely in 20s. And obviously the zebra crossing there, and shops and things. So that's what we look like now. I've included the Battle of Britain, which is 1941, because Year 6 just done a unit on the Second World War, haven't they?
Yeah, we've just looked at the Battle of Britain specifically. So if you've got any Year 6 siblings at home or anyone you get in touch with, they can help you with that.
Yeah.
But
so,
yeah,
we know
recent history still.
Yeah, still recent history, and we're still something that we talk about a lot, because we've got the 75th anniversary of VE Day next Friday.
Yeah.
Being celebrated. So victory in Europe. So you can see here on our timeline, that's 80 years is quite a short. There's a short span on our timeline here, because we're having to find the ancient Greeks. We're having to go back, look, 1,000 years to 1000 AD. I've put this on here because this is quite interesting, because we talk about ancient civilizations, and in school we also learn about the Romans, invaders and settlers. That's Year 3, isn't it, I think?
Oh, Year 4, I believe. Year 4.
Right. Sorry,
so
Year
you'd
4.
have just found out about that.
So our invaders are the Romans, and look, we have to go back 1,500 years, just over 1,500 years, to see when the Roman Empire finally fell. Yeah. We then go back to Year 1, so we've gone back 2,020 years now to Year 1, the birth of Christ. And then we have to go back another 500 years and another 300 years to 800 BC for the start of the Greek civilization. So we've had to go back 1,000, 2,000, about 2,800 years in time to find when our Greek civilization started. Pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
No, it definitely is. And the fact that it's so long ago, and as we're going to explore in this unit, there are things that are going to still be influences in our lives today, is absolutely mind-blowing, actually, that something so far back in history still has a relevance to us.
Yeah, we're still using the things that they invented, or they started, some of the movements they started. So let's move on to that now then. So on screen 4 here, me and Mrs. Bulloss have just broken down some of the really interesting elements of Greek society and Greek life that we'll be looking at in deeper during this history unit. So one of the first things I think is fascinating about them is that they invented the Olympic Games, sadly cancelled this year thanks to the COVID-19 coronavirus, but the Olympic Games, which we talked about earlier. We then still watch and are entertained and learn from their myths and legends. Yeah, featuring all sorts of gods and heroes and mythical creatures and monsters. So there's elements of myths and legends there that were important to their culture. We then religion, which we talked about in terms of us being westernized Christian-based societies, but they were. I had to look this up. They were polytheists, which means they believed in more than one god. So they worshipped and believed in, there were lots of different gods. And Zeus is one, if you remember, to our key vocabulary, is the big cheese of the Greek gods. Can I say that in a history lesson?
Oh, you've done it.
I just did. Yeah. That's not a technical historical term that you need to learn, boys and girls. What is really fascinating, come on, you year 6 and older children, year 5s and 6s, the mathematics that the Greeks developed. So lots of work around shape and particularly triangles and theories of how to calculate areas of circles. The invention of pi in terms of a mathematical term, huge. We still learn basic Greek maths because it's still relevant today. Scientists developing theories of displacement, etc. Writers and philosophers, which we've talked about earlier. And then their society is that lots of elements of their society which are still interesting and we use today. So democracy, the entertainment and leisure, so theatres were really popular. What were their families like, their homes like, shopping and fashion? Right, so that's kind of an overview in terms of where the Greeks, when the Greek society started, and little elements that we're going to explore. And then me and Mrs. Bulloss thought what would be interesting is to do something like this. So we've taken democracies from the previous slide here. So we've taken democracy there, where is it there? Society, democracy. And we've said, okay, well, what do we know already? Well, me and Mrs. Bulloss know that we get to vote in elections every kind of between 4 and 6 years. We vote for someone to be in charge, but they don't get to do everything they like because that's not democracy. So even though we've got a prime minister, he doesn't get to make all the decisions. He has to go through parliament, who either vote for his idea or against his idea, or they like his idea, but they want to change his idea. So we get a say through our politicians about laws and deciding what we do. Everyone over 18 can vote in our society. And there are different types of voting systems around the world that are democratic. So just because we have kind of like a first past the post system, that's not like that in other countries. So then we came up with the following questions, didn't we, Mrs. Bulloss, that we wanted to find out about the Greeks?
Yeah, we did. We thought actually we need to sort of know where we're going when we're thinking about our learning and where it wants to take us, rather than jumping straight in and going for everything and all things. So the first thing that we wanted to think about was actually, why did they use democracy to make decisions? Where does that idea come from? What was going on before they introduced the idea of democracy? And actually, is their democracy, how did it work in relation to what we know it to be like? Is it the same? Is it different? What are the similarities? So then we started to think, well, what could we think about for similarities and differences? And actually, who could vote? We know in our society, men and women can vote, children can't vote. Was that the case in the ancient Greeks? Did they have political parties? We have the Conservatives, Labour, the Green Party. How did they work? And did they have a prime minister? And I think it's really important that you have some ideas for what do you want to find out. So you're taking ownership of your learning in the direction that you want it to go in.
Yes, and then what we want you to do is email us your research questions, because then we can start to create the next lesson around the things that you want to find out. What's also good, if you've got access to the internet, is that you can start to find out some of these things already and start to direct your own learning. So once you've got your own set of questions, you can then start to answer your own set of questions, and you can send us what you have found out as well. So what me and Mrs. Bulloss will do is we'll create a list of websites for you to look at, for you to start to research the ancient Greeks. Because just don't go straight into Wikipedia, because some of it is really quite, is it even too hard for me to understand? Not even too hard, it is too hard. Even too hard for Mrs. Bulloss to understand. Lots of things are too hard for me to understand. So we'll try and find some child-friendly websites about the ancient Greeks you can find out, start to engage in the questions that you've set. And then using your questions, we'll design the next lesson. Hopefully it'll be something maybe around the Olympics, because that'll be quite an exciting thing to start with. So that's that, Mrs. Bulloss, isn't it?
Oh yes, that was lovely. Thank you for inviting me to help.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for your help.
It's been ages.
So we'll send it. So we'll send it to year 5. So because it is your topic, but I know year 6s have probably already done this last year. But if year 6 you want to go back and start writing and sharing what you learned last year about what you already know about the ancient Greeks, you can join in with this unit as well. Okay. Thanks, Mrs. Bulloss.
Thank you.
Love to the
Bye.
family. Take care.